until this is sorted out, it's a very messy business getting to the end of the season, and I think that everyone knew that when they started it, and I reckon a lot of those, like the Sunraysia, who chose very early in the piece to say, let's cut it, no more, we've had enough, let's move on.
Great to be with you with the Flowman here in the studios.
Great to be with you on Monday morning. Always nice to have a look at results on the weekend. Unfortunately, no results for Victoria and New South Wales for us to bring, Rikki, but it has been a tough one for administrators because the competitions have started to fall. Those that have said, we just can't go any further. We've lost Sunraysia last week. Golden Rivers made their announcement on Friday that they wouldn't be continuing. So for Nullawil, there is no benefit in being undefeated for the whole year, unfortunately for that club.
Well, and those decisions were made before Daniel Andrews extended the lockdown, and there's no real end date with this at the moment on Sunday. So North Central, they crossed the border as well. Where do you see that one going?
No border crossing as such. The issue there is the Melbourne crossing. A lot of the players in Donald, or for the Donald club, are lads that have come up from the city, some of them expat to Donald, and come home to play, bring a couple of mates. And so around 10, 11, 12 players on their squad would be their senior squad of footballers out of Melbourne. Now, what this creates is a problem when they do look for their finals to begin. Sea Lake Nandaley, who are the Tigers, haven't been headed except for the one game against Birchip Watcham this year. They would play in a 1 versus 4 scenario where Birchip Watcham would play Wedderburn as a 2 versus 3. But the problem here is that if they don't get the Melbourne-based players, then Donald are likely to forfeit that game. Now, that would mean that they'd be out for the season. They'd not play against Sea Lake Nandaley with a second-tier Donald Locals side. They would not be able to do so. They would get nailed by Sea Lake Nandaley by a big margin, so they would more likely forfeit. That would mean that Sea Lake Nandaley would get a direct access into the grand final, still not having played a game of football since early July.
Yeah, that's crazy. You think about teams liking to have a week off before the grand final, but not 8 weeks off. That's phenomenal. They're going to come in very underdone.
Yes.
What about, so in the Wimmera area, they're a little, maybe perhaps a bit more isolated from the reliance on Melbourne players?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a different scenario, but both Horsham District and Wimmera have met. Now, at this stage, Horsham District have not said that they won't do their top 6, albeit, though, the new announcement by the Andrews government, I think when the next meeting of Horsham District could put pay to the top 6 situation, so that would be clubs 5 and 6 on their premiership ladder, would be out, and they would go back to a top 4, 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, as other comps have done, to get a prelim final situation and a grand final. So just virtually another 2 weeks to play and get it over and done with. And this becomes a critical question, and obviously for North Central, they may well look at it and say, it's got too hard. We don't think that we're going to get this done, particularly if the lockdown that we're seeing in Victoria would continue right through to, say, AFL Grand Final weekend. AFL Grand Final is likely to be played now in Perth if they can continue to make sure those 2 truck drivers don't cause any further havoc anywhere. And ultimately, you then say, is country football in Victoria almost now done and dusted? And this is the big question for Wimmera football too. They've already decided that they're going for that top 4, and I'm sure that they'll want to play, and I'm sure that even they'll come out in October and play. That's the next scenario we're going to look at. But I'm interested over the border in New South Wales, Rikki. It's phenomenal what we're seeing in Hume, Farrer and Riverina.
Yeah, look, it's amazing with what the Premier's been saying, and where the restrictions are likely to only lift when they've cleared everything out from all the regions of New South Wales, not just somewhere, say, near the Riverina. There's nothing quite close to them for some time. So where do they go? Well,
I think this is the question for administrators, and they were talking again on the weekend about the Riverina and the Hume football administrators. Now, Riverina's in a bit different situation than Hume. Hume is so much further south, and if there are no cases from the Shepparton outbreak, and we know that the Echuca case was a false positive. Again, this testing mechanism doesn't always come up trumps. In fact, they reckon it may be coming up too many positives when they're negatives, and that causes a lot of fear and consternation in towns, as Echuca experienced last week. Now, with that in mind, and them closing down the Shepparton situation, it would appear that then Albury-Wodonga has been protected, and I would suggest to you then that Hume football could get going again if Gladys gives the all clear. Now, she, in her speech last week, when she gave her update, she did almost go to a pain to say that, while there's no cases, we're going to go again with another week just to make sure of the situation. I think that is a positive light there for administrators, particularly of the Hume football. Riverina and Farrer, not sure. They may well be in a situation where they will still be held back, but let's hope all of regional New South Wales comes out of lockdown and we can finish those 3 leagues in New South Wales.
Or maybe, Flowman, they'll have to show their COVID passport that they're vaccinated to be allowed to play. You're only getting freedom in New South Wales if you're vaccinated.
Well, and that becomes the question. I know that the Queensland border and also the one with Victoria, the Victorian-based players may not be vaccinated. Officials of the game, the people that actually turn up to open the gates can come from over the border because a lot of folk travel into border. They have an affiliation with a club that they were once maybe involved with when they were younger, and they live nearby, but on the Victorian side rather than maybe the New South Wales side. This puts all sorts of pressure on clubs, and again, until this is sorted out, it's a very messy business getting to the end of the season, and I think that everyone knew that when they started it, and I reckon a lot of those, like the Sunraysia, who chose very early in the piece to say, let's cut it, no more. We've had enough. Let's move on.
Yeah, I think for administrators, they'll be looking at that too hard basket.
Certainly the too hard basket, Rikki. I would be suggesting that maybe Gladys and maybe Daniel Andrews should have a meeting, and they won't. That's the problem here. Politics has been played across the border, and ultimately the Prime Minister probably has to make some pretty definite calls because we're not going to see any more sport in regional Victoria and New South Wales unless, I think by this Thursday, both opened up in some form in the regions. I think we could call it this Thursday, and I reckon that's what people are waiting for. Some unbelievable action across country South Australia. We were blessed to have the sunshine and blessed to have some terrific action.
Yeah, that's a good point. Usually finals footy, the weather's warmer, but the longer they've delayed the season, the warmer it's going to get. Could be a factor for fitness for players, but let's strap into the roller coaster and we'll start down in the southeast. Wayne, an incredible game between Keith and Naracoorte.
Well, it went to overtime. They were in the second 5-minute sector of the overtime, and finally it was Keith who broke the deadlock and beat the Naracoorte 11-19-85 to 11-13-79. They weren't kicking that straight, the Keith boys, and they let Naracoorte in, but at full time it was equal and a draw, and the comments that I've read about the game are that it's one of the great matches of KNT footy.
Yeah, and the Kingston Saints, sadly, they just weren't up to the pace. They still get another chance, though.
The double chance, but they won't want to go out in straight sets, the Saints, so they're going to have to throw everything at Keith this week in what will be an excellent first semi-final. It means that the Padthaway Lions actually go through and face Mundalla. Let me tell you, I've spoken to some Mundalla people and they fear the Lions more than anybody else in the competition. So it's the old factor of the Tigers that don't like Lions.
Well, maybe Kingston Saints will like where they're going to come from there. They're well and truly the underdogs in that top 3. Let's go to the neighbouring game between Hatherleigh and Robe in the Mid-South East League. Close result here too.
Yeah, disappointment for our Robe Roosters, folk. Went down 12-12-84 to 11-12-78. Robe led this match for a good portion of it, particularly in three-quarter time terms. They were 2-3 up, and they got nailed by a fast-finishing Hatherleigh. And look, there's nothing more you can say. Football is often the winner in these games, and while you lose, you'll down the track say, you know what, we did absolutely everything we could and threw everything at it, but in the end, Hatherleigh, they go through to the next round.
Yeah, it's a funny old game, football, and there was a lot talked about the Westhoff brothers back at the Tanunda Footy Club in Barossa Light and Gawler League, but it's all ended in tears on the weekend. Yeah,
this is a strange one, isn't it? Like Tanunda's form in the latter part of the season fell off, and suddenly the Westhoff boys were playing every week. It was the point that maybe Justin might just play a handful of games and certainly turn up when it come finals, but Williston, who don't win away and struggle away from home, well, away up at Nuriutpa, they didn't struggle anymore. They absolutely cleaned up the Tanunda Magpies in a great style, 13-14-92 to 9-13-67. And Williston kicked 6 in the first quarter to 1 to set it up. Now, Jars doesn't have too many away wins, but if you remember, the grand final is at Williston. And if they can get through a prelim final, then look out for the Donnybrooks.
Oh, they must must have brought some real intensity at the start of that match to get out that fast, that quick. But the Westhoff boys in the two best players for Tanunda, but they'll have to have another look at next year.
I think so, and just shows you, even with big name players, in finals footy, anyone can win it when you've got a chance and you're out on the field to have a look at it. But I thought the Mallee on the weekend, how about this? Pinaroo got nailed the week before by BDT. They led at halftime in that game 6-1. In this game, they led 7-1. And in the third quarter, if you check that out, they've booted 7-1 and set up a lead at that stage, 14-7 to 2-4, to run out winners 19-10 to 3-7. A demolition of Lameroo like you have not seen. They were angry. They went out. I'm told the Big Bruce commentated it for MFL TV. He said it was like they went through everything. They were running through walls. These guys were so bent on getting back into a grand final. And another dip at BDT this weekend, which I'm looking forward to commentating. Huge
contest there, and that'll be great to have your call there at the match. Let's have a look quickly at what was the results in the Northern Areas football. Orroroo and Broughton Mundura, Wayne, a pretty close one there too.
Yeah, Orroroo got over Broughton Mundura. Broughton Mundura got over Orroroo. It was bad kicking from Orroroo that was their issue. But the real story here is BMW. Actually, in the other match, they got up and beat the Southern Flinders, and they were 1 goal at half time and kicked 9 goals in the second half to come home with a wet sail and beat Southern Flinders. This is, again, if I do say it, Lions beating Tigers. Interesting, eh?
Yeah, look, I think that's going to be one they're going to talk about for some time to come. I mean, in a final to come back from that far back is phenomenal.
It certainly is. Looking across to the northeast and not far away, the final round of home and away matches didn't change anything. The Southern Saints beat Minman in the game of the round 11-11 to 10-7. BSR over RSMU. BBH, a good win for them at home in their final match of the season over North Clare, and Blyth Snowtown thrashing South Clare in the other game. It sets up their finals, which start this weekend, and they'll be at Clare and at Snowtown. Southern Saints versus BSR at Clare on the Saturday, second semi-final action for a booking to a grand final, and RSMU and Minman in the knockout at Snowtown.
Yes, they had their final minor round there in that league, but there's a league that was a lot further ahead, Wayne, for their finals.
Yes, there was a grand final played on the weekend, and it was the Hornridge boys, the Black and Whites, have got up and won our first grand final. They've beaten Olympic Dam, which we probably expected, but Olympic Dam, it was their first grand final, and they hadn't been actually in a grand final since 2011. Unfortunately, they did win back in 2011. They didn't win in 2021, unfortunately for them, but for Hornridge, they celebrated. The big story, though, is on the Western Air, where they were set to play in their preliminary final matches, and the COVID scare with the 2 truck drivers put paid to that, and so they'll be now discussing how they finish their season, whether they can get a clearance for, again, the preliminary finals to be played this weekend at Penong. I'm even told that the kids were already out there at the field ready to play, and the pies were in the warmer, and the whole thing was called off. Unbelievably upsetting for everyone involved. Of course, knowing the reasons why, but at the same time thinking through how hard that would be on the kids, gearing yourself up mentally to play, and then being told, we're not playing.
Yeah, so West Coast Hawks, they're waiting for the grand final. I think it's at Sejuna this Saturday, in theory, but that just can't happen.
Won't happen. It'll be delayed now. One would expect an extra week. The preliminary finals will go ahead. I think Penong will just still get the preliminary finals. Probably put the pies back in the freezer, I think. Might be the way to go.
Oh, gee.
Not sure.
Not sure if that meets food safety standards.
Let me just say that I did see that the local butcher, Big Schreiber, he was selling some meat very cheaply, and apparently it all went. People got some very special priced meat that was due to go up to the footy.
Well, I think when we look across the border at Victoria, New South Wales, and leagues just cancelling finals altogether, if we had to wait another week, it's going to be worth if we can get it done in the end.
It really is, Ricky, but what a great time of the year, finals footy.